G'day. How's everyone going? My name's Dozza. Just hopefully you can all hear me in the chat. Let's have a look. We've got Dingo Wolf, Claz, and T-Bird. Let's go. I just wanted to do a quick stream and discuss some of the updates that I've seen RH talk about recently. Hope everyone had a good Christmas and good New Year's. Let us know in the chat if you can hear me, I guess, first of all. We had a pretty good time, sort of getting back into the swing of things now. So, I thought I'd just have a quick chat initially about some of the things that I just thought were cool that came about. I noticed, I think it was Tangent that posted about it on Twitter. It's like hex_tangent. Check him out. Of course, most people already know who he is. It's this meta aggregator. So it's like with your matcher or 1inch, they are an aggregator of dexes anyway. So this is kind of like an aggregator of aggregators, which I thought was kind of cool. I think it's still in its beta mode, but one of the cool things about this that I saw is that it has a private mode. So you can fully because you go through this DeFi Llama server, you can hide your IP address. Depending on whether you're going through a VPN or whatever, some nodes log that stuff. So this might just be another additional layer that could be useful. I noticed it had hex as like I didn't have to import the contract address, so that was pretty cool. And I think when I used it, Matcher came up anyway, and that's or CowSwap, and so these are ones 1inch that we're sort of familiar with. DeFi Llama is pretty good. It's got some cool stuff in there about it looks like the audio's okay. I'm getting like some okay stuff. DeFi Llama's got some cool things in there about like total value locked and stuff like that. It's just, I probably should have checked this beforehand, but yeah, it's sort of interesting if you're looking at different chains and things like that. There's bridges and other bits of information there, so it's kind of a useful site. But that meta aggregator I thought was pretty awesome. So I noticed RH recently had just done a screenshot for a launchpad for like a staking launchpad for the PulseChain testnet v3 that's sort of imminent, which is really making me think that it is kind of closer than we thought. There's been a lot of talk in the community at the Hex conference. Shout out to all the guys there at that conference. They did an amazing effort. I can't believe how many hours of content there are there. But a couple of the things we'll talk about later. But this was one of the things that sort of came out just after the conference, which is very similar. If you have a look at the Ethereum website, like where it just talks about the merge and all of this sort of stuff, it's got its own staking launchpad. So this is obviously where it's sort of, we're doing a fork of, or they are doing a fork of Ethereum, and which is now proof of stake. And so the whole consensus mechanisms has changed. You've got this execution layer and a consensus layer, and we no longer delegated proof of stake, but there is a consensus layer which does the proof of stake consensus. So that's this beacon chain that they're talking about here. So this has got the APR and, obviously a lot of validators. And then this was the screenshot, which was very similar. They're on a test net and they've got sort of limited number of validators, of course, which is potentially why that APR is so high. So I suspect that these numbers should just be taken with a grain of salt because this is just test net stuff. But it looks like they've possibly incorporated this staking launchpad into like a dApp of sorts, because it's also got the Pulse Bridge tab up here. And so I was going to do a stream about bridges. I can take this back. I was going to do a stream about bridges, and I was really keen to run through the Pulse ramp thing with everyone. And because I've done it many times and it's lots of fun, but the Rinkeby testnet, like the Ethereum Rinkeby testnet, has been deprecated. So that doesn't exist anymore. So they would have to change the Pulse ramp bridge from the testnet V2B to Go Early or Ropstein or something else, because this Rinkeby is being deprecated. So that bridge, you might have noticed, doesn't work. And it looks like they're pretty much just waiting for testnet V3 before they incorporate the new bridge, and possibly with that tab that might be like this dApp, you might be able to just launch the staking launchpad and then also just go to the bridge or whatever, or just go to PulseX and do your DEX stuff there. So yeah, that was pretty cool. I thought the other stuff that Richard talked about during the Hex conference was a little bit more technical. I mean, admittedly, like he even said it himself, it was a little bit complicated, but I thought I could break it down a little bit. I had a look, this is a good diagram of what went down with the merge. So you have this beacon chain, which was your consensus layer, and which was proof of stake, that merged with the execution layer. So in the past, you could just become like a validator just using an execution client. So there's two types of node operators, effectively, ones that produce blocks and ones that don't. So if you're actually producing blocks, I mean, either way, you need to run both a consensus client and an execution client. And then they're synced, and there's this shared JWT secret, which effectively like communicates or syncs the two clients together. But if you're producing blocks, then you need to stake this, the 32 ETH, or in this case for PulseChain, it's the 32 million PLS. But it might be interesting for people who want to just do sort of non-block producing nodes on PulseChain. Maybe some people don't have 32 million ETH or 32 million Pulse. So there is, I guess, options for it. And it was really interesting to see RH talk about that there might be some way of just having like an executable where you just load, you can just have like a node that you just install without having to use, using JavaScript, forking Geth, and all sorts of things like that. Like I tried to do it myself, and I got to a point where I was like, I need to use a Linux machine, and like there's all this Docker stuff you can use. But anyway, that's probably something I wouldn't recommend. Hopefully we can get an easier way of creating a node, because it also adds, it makes the network more robust. So that's one of the things, and more decentralized. So yeah, this is an interesting one anyway, for people who want to go through it at some point. The difference between a node that produces blocks or one that doesn't. Because I was talking about the two different types of clients, like having a execution layer and a consensus layer. Most people, I think, have heard these terms, but they are sort of, this is the Lighthouse Sigma Prime website, and I thought they had a pretty good description of it here, where the execution layer processes the transactions inside a block, maintains the world state of contract and account balances, whereas the consensus chooses which blocks should and should not be included in the canonical chain. So I guess, like, depending on the GUI and whether they meet all of the protocols and things like that, the consensus will choose how to build those blocks and which transactions to include in each block. And so the different types of clients, I mean, there's lots of different analogies you can use to think about this, like whether you're thinking of the nodes as being like the internet, and, the clients as being like a browser, and you can use different browsers, but you can still access the internet. Other analogies I've heard are not that great, but they recommend that there's different types of consensus clients that are used to improve client diversity, which is, I think, like adding robustness to the network. So Prism and Lighthouse seem to be the two types of consensus clients that the devs are working on. And in terms of the execution layer, that obviously it's been, they've been using Geth this whole time, but now they started talking about using Aragon as an execution client. So I had a bit of a look, and one of the differences with Aragon seemed to be it provided faster, more modular, more optimized implementation of Ethereum, could perform a full archive node sync for about 2 terabytes of disk space in under 3 days. So that's pretty, like, syncing of these nodes does take a long time, from what I've heard. There's different types of nodes. There's like full nodes, light nodes, archive nodes, pruned archive nodes, all this sort of stuff. But the fact that this Aragon seems to be a slightly more efficient implementation of this Ethereum execution client. So yeah, it was. Lighthouse seemed to be. This is the consensus sort of beacon chain consensus layer. This seemed to be, a very common sort of one of the most. This and Prism seem to be one of the most common consensus clients that get used. Shout out to Crypto Coffee. I think I got this this link from. Oh, this is for Rocket Pool. That's, I think, the liquid staking of Ethereum. But yeah, this was kind of useful. You can go into more detail. You can go into the GitHub and all that sort of stuff as well. But it's not terribly interesting. One of the other interesting things was it sounded like they're using a beacon chain Lighthouse open source block explorer. It was mentioned at some point. So that is pretty much just the same as like the block scout that we've got. And also like, Etherscan. So this will just be, I think, better than block scout. I'm not a huge fan of block scout. And I'm not quite sure why they can't just, pay for the license for Etherscan, but there might be other reasons. I know one of the complications that they were talking about was with, forking Lighthouse for their consensus. Then they have to change the memory slot for however many token, because you've got 1 million times the supply of PLS as you do for ETH. So they have to increase the memory size of that allocation. John Clooney's in the chat. There you go. T-Bird. I'm happy to chat about other things if people are keen. I just thought I'd do, a bit of a quick chat about some of this stuff. When it comes to block explorers, one of the useful things I found was it's a website called BlockScan. It's kind of cool if you're looking at different chains, like if you're just interested in them. Of course, you've got like Etherscan. One of the cool things I was going to talk about with Etherscan is you can, if you actually sign in, because it took me some time to actually bother to sign in, and you can use different email addresses that are maybe not doxed or not tied to personally, but you can track different wallets with Etherscan and then get that those alerts sent to your email. And so also if you're worried about like those, so like say you're tracking like Godwale's wallet or something like that, and you see him moving like a whole bunch of ETH like onto an exchange or whatever, it's kind of cool to speculate as to why he might be doing that or what's going on. But it's also a good way of monitoring your own wallets if you get airdrops and things like that, and then you can kind of go and inquire to see whether they're legitimate or malicious airdrops. You've got to be real careful with airdrops. So that's pretty cool. Speaking of airdrops, there has been a couple recently. That Texan token actually was legit. So I think that was, when I looked at it, it was worth about $30. So that was sent to the PulseChain SAC set, I think. And I think you had to go in and, click a few buttons to claim it, but then it just got airdropped. There's the Poor Pleb. There was, but some of these ones are almost not mentioning, like there was the Communist one. I mean, there might be worth looking at if you haven't heard of them. It's depending on how many TJs you've got, how many hex stakes you've got. I think it's native hex stakes as well, and then it's you can get some proportional to how many TJs you've got. So that's the Communist one. I mean, there's a whole bunch of others, but I don't really like to talk about them because if they're like competing with RH products and things like that, I'm not really interested. And most of them, be fair, most of the airdrops are going to be either malicious tokens trying to drain your wallet if you interact with them, or just scam coins which are just like worth nothing. So every now and then you get one that's worth something. T-Bird said that the claim phase for Texan ended like in November, last year. So that's cool. So where was I going with this? Yeah, if you are looking on Etherscan, you can log in, use a different email, and you can track, Godwell, whoever, your own wallet. You can see when you get tokens airdropped, or if you've been hacked, you'd be like, hang on, why is there tokens moving out of my out of that wallet? That would be a concern. But yeah, this BlockScan site, you can just look at like all the different iterations of Etherscan, like on these different chains and things. And I was only really going to talk about this because I think in a bear market, it's kind of cool to just explore things. You can create other accounts with your MetaMask and just put minimal dollars in there, and then you can sort of, I wouldn't recommend doing it with any of your main wallets or main accounts, but you can create separate accounts and then just sort of play with some of these things. Snow Trace is a cool name, I reckon, for the AVAX Etherscan equivalent. But yeah, there's like, there's a Polygon block explorer or whatever. Like, it's just kind of cool that it's there. Not that I use it much, but it's good to know that it's there. Also, like if you wanted to look at, dexes, it's got a few of them. You can filter by chain. Bridges is also pretty cool. And yeah, I was also going to talk about like when it comes to layer 2s like Arbitrum and Optimism and things like that. That is one thing that people get a little bit confused about when we're talking about consensus layers and execution layers like this. This is very different to, like, this is still a layer 1 chain, just with an execution layer and a consensus layer, and those two clients make up the nodes in that L1. But there are layer 2 chains which work through roll-ups and things like that. So yeah, there was, I'll see if I can bring this across. This one I was looking at, which was talking about Arbitrum. I'm not actually a huge fan of L2s. I mean, it's interesting to like play around with them if you can be bothered, and on like a separate wallet, But one of the things that I was reading about were they were talking about optimistic rollups, and they were saying about how Arbitrum rollup chain runs a sort of submodule within Ethereum. Unlike regular layer 1 transactions, it doesn't require Ethereum nodes to process every Arbitrum transaction. Rather, it adopts an innocent until proven guilty attitude. So the layer 1s optimistically assume activity on Arbitrum is following the proper rules, and then if there's a violation that occurs, the claim can be disputed back on the L1. So it rolls up all these transactions on this separate chain, and then bridges them back to the L1, and then so it kind of relies on this dispute mechanism. And I was like, I'd rather see a fork. I mean, yeah, there's side chains and parachains and things like that as well, but I'd still rather like actually see a fork of something that works, rather than having a chain that is an add-on to another chain and then has all these roll-ups and stuff, and then there's disputes and stuff between the chains. I felt that was a little bit shady. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I wanted to chat about. A few more cycles from Junklemy. Yeah, hopefully only one more cycle, maybe two. Ash is saying this is good. That's awesome. Good to see you, Ash. I've got to mod some of these guys. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I was going to give, a couple of minor talking points at the end for anyone that was sort of still listening. One of them was a minor sort of, Easter egg thing, which was that I noticed there's this front end for a coin that I won't mention, that's been made by a community member, where because something about in the way that these, there's going to be no way I can talk about this without saying the tokens. So something in the way that these ASIC miners are ended, if they're not ended within like a 60-day period, there is an opportunity for other people to end it for them. And then you can get like, I think it's 50% of the ASIC that was mined in that 60-day period. So yeah, this front end, I'll leave it in the description, probably with all the other links as well. It actually allows you to, it happens at like 1:25 a.m. my time, which is a super annoying time. and you can try and basically outbid other people to end these miners, and it hasn't really worked out for me, and I don't really recommend it. So because you end up just losing money in gas, but it is kind of interesting that this exists. And yeah, I thought, you can actually have a look at some of this stuff on or you can actually look at, like, say on Etherscan, you can actually look at the contract address. So it's like yeah, you guys can still see this, I think. If you look at the contract, and there's a write contract, a write function where you can write. It's basically how you end the miner. So you can do it at a contract level, and some people, I think, have created bots that interact with this aspect of that contract, and then you put in the miner index, which is the order of the miners in the array, and then the miner ID, and then the wallet address of where you want the ASIC to go once you've mined it. I think that's how it works. And you can, like, if you right click on this and inspect, you can see Corky, who's done this. He's got the miner IDs for each of these in there. But I spent a little bit of time mucking around with it, and the GUI was ridiculously high. If you wanted to, it happens super quick. Like, every man and his dog is, and it's probably bots as well, that are trying to end these and collect this free ASIC. So you end up just getting failed transactions, and then you're just spending money in gas. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I did think it was interesting. So, like, again, I only mentioned this out of like an academic thing, because it's kind of cool to look at different contracts or whatever, trying to find how to interact with that contract and different functions and things like that. Certainly not lucrative in any way. I think if you are talking lucrative, I think looking at the dip that we're in at the moment with Hex, and just DCAing, that sort of stuff is probably the go. The CPI inflation figures came out today, and they dropped, I think, from 7.1 to 6.5. So I think that gave the market a little bit of, made it slightly buoyant. But Bitcoin basically went on a bit of a tear after hearing that news, and then through Hart's law just dragged up the whole market. Is what I think happened, because everything's bonded by the liquidity in the pairs, basically, to Bitcoin. But that's a very short time frame that we're looking at. So it's easy to kind of get distracted that we're still in a downtrend. And if you're looking at weekly candles, the 10-week moving average is still below the 20-week. The price is barely above it. None of these have crossed over. So until you start to see this type thing, where you get this is the 10-day moving average, the 20-day, 50-day. When you start to see this happening on large time frames, then you might sort of think that they're back into business. But if the next bull run is until 2025, as some people think, then it could just be going sideways for a long time. So you can try and trade these things, but you're probably better off just DCAing while it's low, and then let's go back to Hex. it's at 97% off or something like that. So DCA in, and your percentage gains work in your favor as well. Like it's that thing where you have like 25% down, to 75%. If to get back up to 100%, you need 33%. Like you need like a third to get back to where you are. So buying in when it's at that 25% off, you actually can get 33% gain to get back to where it was. So if you know what I mean, it can actually be beneficial when you see some of these prices. That's pretty much it. I think the liquidity is pretty straightforward. When I had a look at it the other day, it looked like it was sort of sitting in a good range. So yeah, wishing everyone all the best for the new year, and we'll just keep our ear to the ground and see if we can figure out any more of these updates. And I'll maybe do another stream next week, chat about something that might be interesting, maybe bridges, or let us know in the chat or in the comments if you have any things you want me to talk about. It's a good excuse for me to kind of try and learn some of this stuff myself if I'm going to be talking about it. But yeah, good to see it's a good time slot for Ash. That's awesome. And yeah, peace out. I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks.